Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy, and in this tutorial we're going to be creating a email validation form. So you can incorporate the technique I use in this video into any form you like. Now we're going to go down a slightly unconventional route for form validation in terms of email addresses, and we're going to look at doing this using a function that PHP actually gives us. We're not going to be using regular expressions. If you've come across regular expressions before for validating URLs, email addresses, it's extremely complicated on first glance. If you know the certain aspects that make up the regular expressions, then it can look quite easy. But in terms of PHP, we're given a function that allows us to easily filter an email address. Validate an email address. So let's go ahead and test how this works. I'm going to go ahead and just type in, say, alex@php, which obviously isn't a valid email address because we've got no domain extension. So if I click submit, you can see that we get the message, sorry, invalid email address. If I go ahead and type in, say, alex@php.com, which obviously isn't my email address, but if I go ahead and type in my actual email address, submit, we still get that's a valid email address. So if we were to type a load of rubbish in, for example, then you get sorry, an invalid email address. Now there are a couple of problems with this, but it shouldn't really hold you back. If a user is trying to register genuinely on your site, they tend to 90% of the time give a valid email address. However, if they were to accidentally type something, this can get a little tricky in terms of validating the domain extension. Obviously, you can't really validate domain name extensions like .com or .org, for example, because new ones can pop up, new ones can become available at different times. So there can't be a set standard of validating the end of it. So for example, if I typed alex@phpacademy.php, which obviously isn't a valid domain extension, I click submit, it tells me that it's a valid email address, even though it isn't. So be warned that this is a problem with this. However, there's not really much you can do about it apart from validate. You could, for example, split the email address by dots, explode, but then again, that's a whole another tutorial. So we're just going to focus on validating an email address in this way, which does a good job in itself. So we're going to go over to the code or the editor and start writing this out. Okay, so we're starting with a blank canvas. Let's go ahead and create our PHP tags. Now this is where all the validation is going to take place, just up here. And down here, we're going to create our form, which we're going to allow our user to submit an email address. So let's go ahead and create a simple form. We're going to leave the action blank, which is going to submit the form to the current page that we're on. And we're going to supply a method of post. We'll end the form there, and we'll start to create the input. So we've got an input type, first of all, of text. That's where we're going to be placing our email address in. And then we're going to give it a name so we can identify it when we pass this through to PHP. So I'm going to call this user_email. Okay, so below this, let's go ahead and create a submit button. So let's input type submit. We don't need any other attributes for this field. By default in Chrome, let's just see it says submit. So we can type an email address in here now, and we can click submit. That passes the variable or the value in here back to the script. Okay, so inside PHP, we're going to do some other validation here as well. We're first of all going to check if this variable is set, because if we try and access this variable without checking if it is first set, we'll get an error in PHP. For example, echo $_post, click there, user email. If we go back onto our page, you can see that we've got this undefined index error, which is a problem. So the first thing we want to do before we, echo it out or set it into or place it into another variable, we need to go ahead and validate. So let's create an if block just here. We've got if, our parentheses, and then 2 of our curly brackets. We're going to use the isSet language construct, and we're just going to say isSet $_post user email, and we want that to equal true. And we also want to check whether the user has typed anything, because obviously we don't want to validate a blank email address. So we want to say empty $_post user email, and we want this. We want to make sure this is equal to false. So we want to say, is this set, i.e., is it true? Is it empty, i.e., is it not empty? Has it got some content? Then what we can do is place it into its own variable. So I'm going to say email equals $_post user. Let's type that properly. User email. And then below this, we want to go ahead and perform the email validation. Now, this is extremely easy. We can just do this using one function, as I said earlier. So if I was to say if, and then we can create a block there. I want to say, so if filter _var, and then in brackets, I'm going to give this a couple of parameters in a minute, but I want this to equal true. Here, we're going to say yay, and else, we're going to say nay. So this is going to be the message if it's a valid email address, and this is going to be the message if it's a invalid email address. So filter var email, we can pass that variable into it, and now we're going to type here filter _, and in capitals by the way, filter _validate _email. So we're telling this filter var function, which isn't specifically set aside to validate email addresses, it does validate other things as well. We're saying validate this string here, so basically filter var, we're filtering down and checking this variable here for a match, and we're telling it to validate it as an email address. Now if it can't validate it as an email address, this function, then it will pass the value false, i.e. this won't equal true, and we'll end up in this block here. Otherwise it will end up in this block. So here I'm going to go ahead and echo and I'm just going to escape that there, a valid email address. Otherwise we want to say not a valid email address or something like that. So let's go over to our browser and preview this. Let's just go ahead and type in a load of rubbish and click submit. You can see that we get the not a valid email address text. If we go ahead and type in a valid email address, i.e. my email address, and click submit, you see we get the message that's a valid email address. So you can see that using this function, we've easily validated an email address, and you can go ahead and incorporate this into validating through different form fields if your user is typing, say, username and email address, etc., etc. So it's extremely easy just to incorporate into the validation system that you currently have.